The Colts have an interesting issue to sort out at the most important position in all of sports. We'll tell you what we think, but we'll also tell you about it with one of the biggest names in NFL media. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Colts fans, thanks so much for tuning in and making us your number one listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I, of course, am Jake Arthur, and I'm joined by my partner here, Zach Hicks. On today's show, we've got a good one. We're going to be joined by special guest Peter King of NBC Sports and the Football Morning in America column. Yes, that Peter King. We talked about the offseason that the Colts have had, national expectations for this team, and an interesting problem that the Colts now have at quarterback. Zach and I are also going to dive into the final week of Colts training camp and what we would like to see accomplished. Let's obviously start out with our chat with Peter King. I spoke with him during the Colts game against Detroit over the weekend at Lucas Oil Stadium. He needs no introduction, obviously. Everyone knows who Peter King is. He's been at the top of the food chain among NFL journalists for decades now, and he paved the way for guys like Zach and me to be writing and clicking away at Sports Illustrated. So we won't make you guys wait anymore. Here's our chat. Peter King joining me here. We've got kind of a back and forth game today. Is there anything you've seen from any of these Colts bubble guys so far that's really stood out to you?
You know, I don't know if Sam Ehlinger is going to be active or if they'll try to squeeze him onto the practice squad, but I thought he had a really impressive drive after kind of a numbskull first play of the game where he took a 2-yard loss instead of just dumping the ball for a zero. For no gain. But he obviously is an intriguing player. And you'd want to be able to work with him and handle him. And you got to figure out how to handle it. Will you be able to, I'm assuming that they want to keep him. And will you be able to keep him on the practice squad and sneak him through that, or would somebody pick him up? My gut feeling, it's only a gut feeling, is that they'll probably keep him on the 53, and because I kind of think he'd get picked up by somebody, instead of just having him on the practice squad. But I have not watched closely enough to make any judgments on any of their other guys.
Yeah, that's kind of a hot topic right now, is what you can do with him. Can you sneak him through waivers? Can you trade him? What have you? But to some of the guys that we know are going to be out there on Sundays, the nucleus of the Colts has been the same for the last few years, but some pretty drastic new moves, coordinator, quarterback, things like that. What's your assessment of how the Colts have either upgraded or, I guess, regressed this offseason?
Well, I mean, if you look at the offensive side, obviously, I believe that Ryan's an upgrade over Wentz. I think he has been everything the Colts could have wanted early on. And I think that will turn out to be a positive for them. I would expect that he'll be the first non-one-and-done quarterback in the Frank Reich era. Everybody else has been one and done. I think the other interesting addition really has been Alec Pierce. And again, most of these training camps I just parachute into and see him for a day, maybe two. So I don't know, but Colts Twitter seems to love Alec Pierce. Everybody is, they're posting the highlights of him, and Twitter and Instagram seem to kind of love the guy. And there's no question there's a place for him here. So I would assume he's going to play a major role early. On defense, probably, I guess the biggest question will be, what will Shaquille Leonard, a.k.a. Darius Leonard, will he be able to play opening day? What sort of shape will he be in if he does play? Will they have to make some accommodations to this very bulky, frustrating calf injury that he's had? So I don't know. Those probably are the biggest things that I'm curious about with this team right now.
It was already a pretty good defense continuing on that side of the ball, but now you've got Gus Bradley replacing Matt Eberflus. You added a couple star guys like Stephon Gilmore and Yannick Ngakoue. How do you think those additions kind of transform this defense, and do they take another step forward?
I mean, Yannick Ngakoue has been a good pass rusher in his NFL career. It's odd that he's on a new team every 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm a little bit wait and see on Ngakoue because, 3 teams in the last, whatever it is, year and a half have basically let him go or decided to move him, whatever. So, we'll see. Look, Stephon Gilmore, if he stays healthy, will be a superb addition for this defense. But that's the big question, to me, is he going to stay healthy? And as far as Gus Bradley goes, Gus Bradley is like that teacher you had in middle school who every kid in the school wanted to make sure they got into his class.
Really?
He's just he's an effervescent, energetic, ultra positive guy who I think is going to really have a positive impact on this defense.
Last one for you. It seems like it's Colts and Titans at the end of the year every year for the AFC South. Is this the year that the Colts actually get it right, or do they finish strong, or how do you see this finishing for the Colts?
I think if Indianapolis plays efficiently on offense, don't turn it over a lot, then I like Indianapolis to win this division. But every year, first of all, they've got to figure this. They've got to figure out this Jacksonville thing. Yes. It's gone from annoying to a problem.
It's weird. Almost.
It's a big problem, and it's got to be fixed. It's got to be solved. And when they play Tennessee, a history of weird crap has happened when they play Tennessee. They've got to stop that too. And I think Matt Ryan, is going to sort of take this team by the scruff of the neck and say, okay, forget what's happened in the past. We're going to solve this stuff right now. Now, the one thing about playing Tennessee is that is a young, very aggressive defense with a lot of talent. Mm-hmm. So those games have a chance to be, 17-13 and all that. I don't think you're going to see score fests when they play Tennessee. Mm-hmm. But look, they've got to at least split with Tennessee, and they've got to sweep the other 2 teams in the division. That's what has to happen, I think, for them to win the division. Now, one other thing I would say, I think we are all thinking that Houston's going to be 4-13. Okay, I'm not sure that that's true. Lovie Smith is a coach who gets teams competitive. Maybe doesn't get them to be great, but he gets them to be competitive. And I would fear is probably the wrong word. I would think that they've got a chance in that opening game to really stun the Colts. So I think everybody looks at the schedule and say, oh boy, Colts ought to get off to a great start. And I think they probably should win the game, but I don't think that one's a gimme.
Yeah, that's all I got for. I really appreciate you for your time.
Okay, no problem. Huh?
Take care.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Yeah.
And thank you to Peter for sitting down with Jake here and talking about the Colts and the Colts quarterback situation. It's just great to have him here on the show. And next time we got to get him to where I can talk as well. But before we get into the whole Sam Ehlinger and everything that Peter said about the Colts quarterbacks, let's talk about some bets. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. Right now, the Colts are the odds-on favorites to win the AFC South on BetOnline. If you guys are loving what you're seeing in the preseason or in the offseason, go make that bet right now. You could win a little bit of money. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting to scores and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, guys. Thanks again for making the Locked On Colts your first listen of the day every day. However you play, get the latest NFL fantasy draft tips from Locked On Fantasy Football and Locked On Dynasty. Plus, starting August 22nd, we're bringing you daily top 10 lists for fantasy draft week. Locked On Fantasy Football and Locked On Dynasty, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All right, Jake, let's talk about this dilemma, I guess. I don't know if we can call it a dilemma, because I think the only people who think it's a dilemma are the fans right now.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Because before we get into this whole conversation, Nick Foles is the Colts quarterback too. He's going to be the Colts quarterback too this season. Outside of injury, that is not going to change. Outside of injury or just terrible play, which hopefully we never get this either quarterbacks during regular season. It's just Matt Ryan the whole time. But Nick Foles is quarterback too. That's not changing. But there is a lot of rumbling from a lot of fans that, Sam Ehlinger should be quarterback too. They should cut Nick Foles. They should trade Nick Foles. Jake, do you think that Sam Ehlinger has done enough in the preseason to be that quarterback too?
Not for this team. No. I understand if another team that needs a quarterback or they're lacking depth behind their starter wants him. I get it. He's looked great this offseason or this preseason. He looked good last. He's progressing. He's becoming a decent young backup quarterback. There's nothing wrong with that. But the Colts, when they sign Nick Foles, it's in a clear message that we have intentions of winning. We want to go to the Super Bowl this year. Right. Because if something, God forbid, happens to Matt Ryan, Frank Reich has worked with Nick Foles, and they have confidence that Foles can help them tread water while Jonathan Taylor leads the offense and they get to the Super Bowl. Whatever, They trusted Sam Ehlinger last year as the backup, but it's just not the same. Expectations are different now. They can't put their eggs in that basket if something does happen to Matt Ryan. The issue becomes, what do you do with him? If another team comes calling and wants to trade and the values there, sweet, go ahead and do it. But otherwise, do you carry 3 quarterbacks? Because I think they like him a lot and don't want to risk putting him on the waiver wire to try to sneak him on the practice squad. I don't see that happening. It's a big issue. I know Foles is the QB2, but what do you think of all this?
I think the real conversation we should be having is if the Colts should roster Sam Ehlinger as QB3. Because I really don't think it's a conversation about quarterback 2, because, I see this on a lot of comments in our videos too, where people are like, Sam Ehlinger is definitely the better quarterback. What has Nick Foles shown compared to Sam Ehlinger? And I'm like, guys, I know that the NFL is what have you done for me lately, but Nick Foles, albeit not amazing, I am not going to bat for Nick Foles here. I've never been a huge Nick Foles fan, Nick Foles had a season where he had 27 touchdowns and 2 picks or whatever. He had a 7-touchdown game, which is tied for the NFL record. He's had success with Frank Reich in the past. He basically won a Super Bowl for them. He had a great 2-game stretch in the NFC Championship game and in the Super Bowl to win a Super Bowl. And you're comparing that to a guy who's had 4 out of 5 preseason games he's played in. He's looked fine. Like, he's looked good. Like, it's no comparison. This is, and it's easy for us to say at home, like, oh, Sam Ehlinger's doing great in the preseason. It's awesome. But when you have coaches and you have GMs and stuff that have their job on the line, you're going to still be more reliant on that guy who's had proven success in the NFL regular season. And I know a good counter argument to that could be like, oh, Sam Ehlinger's never had a shot. But, that's not our problem here. It's not the Colts' problem here. They have 2 guys. They have one who's been an MVP. Obviously, he's your starter. And you have another guy who's proven that he can at least be a steady backup. It doesn't make sense for the team to move on from Foles for Sam Ehlinger. And it's not even like Foles looked terrible here in the preseason. He threw that 1 pick, which, again, I still don't know if that was a miscommunication or just a bad throw. It could have just been a bad throw. And then the other one, it was a fumble and then 2 scoring drives in 4 drives. Sam Ehlinger's had a lot more drives and had a lot more success in those drives, but it's not like Nick Foles has come out there and been like a train wreck, So I don't know.
Right.
I think it's a weird conversation to have. Nick Foles has proven that he's at least capable of being a very solid backup. And Sam Ehlinger, I think right now is trying to prove that he can be a solid backup. So you already have one guy who's proven that versus the guy who's trying to prove that every time in the preseason. And again, Sam Ehlinger's been great in the preseason. No issues with what he's doing. The ball is coming out of his hand a lot faster. He looks mobile. He looks confident in the pocket. And honestly, for me, I'm a person who would never roster 3 quarterbacks. I would understand the Colts doing it and wouldn't object to it because I get it. I get it. He's showing some things. I just don't think it's a conversation for him at QB2. It doesn't make any sense for me. And again, this comes from someone who doesn't like Nick Foles that much. It's just Nick Foles has proven that he can be a solid backup. I don't know why you go away from that from a guy who hasn't proven that he can be a solid backup. He's just had some good preseason games. I mean, it's like look at the Dolphins right now. If you were looking at the Dolphins, right, are they having the same conversation with Skylar Thompson should be the backup over Teddy Bridgewater? Skylar Thompson's had the similar stats to Sam Ehlinger in the preseason. But if we're watching that as non-biased fans, we're like, it's just a guy targeted the preseason. But when you watch it from, it's like, oh, that's my team. And you see a guy having the great stats, like, oh my gosh, this is our starting quarterback, So it's just the way the preseason goes. But all this did not take away anything from Sam Ehlinger, though. I mean, he's looked great. And again, I think if it comes down to it and they have an extra roster spot, I'm all for keeping him as QB3.
Yeah, I mean, to his credit, he can only perform against the defenses he's being placed with, and he's shredding them for the most part.
Right.
But and while it's fun to debate, I can almost feel certain, speaking on behalf of the Colts, in that this is not a competition.
It's not.
It's
Frank Reich kind of said that today too. Like Frank
Reich he got a question which was kind of framed as a Sam Ehlinger question, and he took the opportunity to talk about Nick Foles. So that kind of tells you everything you need to hear. All right, Zach, before we move on, it's time to get serious once again. Talk about something that, it's hard to talk about sometimes, but a lot of us need to hear it. Imagine it. You're hanging out with some friends and you're putting a few drinks back. A few becomes a few too many. Been there before, guys. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling a ride or, Uber, taxi, whatever. But nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyways? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. All those things are certainly possible. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your whole life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. And now on a more upbeat note, we'd like to introduce you guys to one of our new sponsors, Homefield, which is a premium collegiate apparel brand out of here in Indianapolis. Their clothes are incredibly comfortable, and they have officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. I know just from watching sports fans here in Indy, we love to wear a good jersey. We love our sports apparel, and we love investing in a company like this that's from our own neck of the woods. Being a local brand to Indianapolis, the Colts reached out to Homefield for an exclusive partnership to launch this collection of Homefield Colts apparel. This is Homefield's first NFL collection, guys, and it's a super exciting opportunity to work with a big-time NFL franchise like the Colts. The two collaborated exclusively to make this co-branded collection, bringing Indianapolis together. They've got 6 items for you guys to dig into so far. A hoodie, a crew neck, 2 t-shirts, joggers, which is right up my alley, and a jacket. It's the perfect collection to kick off the season, especially if you guys need some new digs for the season. It's an exciting new chapter for the Colts with Matt Ryan and everyone on defense. So make it an exciting new chapter for your weekend wardrobe too. Why not? This collection officially launches on Saturday, August 27th at noon Eastern. Homefield was nice enough to get us set up with some new threads, and guys, these are legit. They're crazy comfortable, and they look good too. Since I work from home and I'm here the majority of the time, these things are comfy enough to lounge around in, but I'm also stunting on them when I go outside too. Not going to lie. For new customers, you guys can get 15% off of your first purchase from Homefield with code Locked On Colts at checkout at homefieldapparel.com. All right, Zach, we are almost through training camp. It's bittersweet. I'm ready to not be running around everywhere constantly, but also training camp, it's once a year. We love it.
Right.
They have 3 practices left, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then they finish up the preseason as well on Saturday. So you and I have discussed this for the past couple weeks. Some things you see in the preseason, it looks bad, but it's really nothing to be concerned about because it's not the actual gameplay. Like, this is the time to try things out and make mistakes. But there have been some things maybe to take note of. Has there been anything that you've seen that's concerning legitimately that needs to be fixed moving forward going into the season?
Yeah, so I'll actually go a couple of things here where I'll say these things concern me a lot or a decent amount, and these things don't really concern me, even though they concern everybody else. So I'll make it 2 categories. So the first one that I'll say does kind of concern me a good bit is that defensive tackle depth. I think that's really concerning. I like Eric Johnson. I like Curtis Brooks. I love their long-term potential. I don't know how good they're going to be in year 1. And it's tough because, again, you don't want these defensive tackles racking up 70, 80, 90% of the snaps. You want to be able to spell them. You want to be able to get them out of the game and not play that much. So having good rotational defensive tackles really helps. And I just don't know if the Colts have anyone on their roster capable of that in 2022. That I'm pretty concerned about. Cornerback 5 and 6. I know that's a weird thing to be nervous about, but I don't think the Colts have a 5th corner that's capable of playing on Sundays on this team. And right now we saw, Brandon Faison went down with an injury in the first preseason game. Isaiah Rodgers is out with concussion right now. Stephon Gilmore's had injury concerns in the past. Kenny Moore's had some injury concerns. The Colts are going to need someone at cornerback 5. And I'm terrified of it being another situation where Bo Pete Keys goes out there for one play and allows a double move for a touchdown. I'm terrified of another situation like that. So I'm legitimately concerned about those 2 things on defense. But flipping it a little bit to my other 2 categories that I'm not as concerned about right now, I'm surprisingly not as concerned about wide receiver. And I know that's something we've talked. I mean, we've made so many shows about it. But they need a veteran wide receiver. They need these guys to step up. But seeing Alec Pierce and his growth through the offseason so far, seeing Paris Campbell make some plays, and then seeing Strawn coming back and looking and just making it look easy when he was out there. Again, I'm not saying Mike Strawn is going to be leading this team in catches, but he kind of quelled a lot of my concerns about wide receiver 5 just from those couple of snaps he played this past game. But a lot of it really has to do with Alec Pierce for me. I think Alec Pierce has the makings to be a really, really solid contributor in year 1. And just seeing him and seeing Strawn, seeing some of Paris Campbell, I don't know. I'm not terribly concerned about wide receiver right now. I know that'll probably come back to bite me. And then the last one I wanted to throw here was just offensive line depth. I talked about it a little bit on the last show, so I won't go too in detail here, but I'm not really that concerned about O-line depth. I know a lot of people are saying, the backup O-line looks terrible. But when you have Will Fries, Bernard Ryman, Dennis Kelly, I think that's a solid trio to have there backing up your O-line. So I'm really not too concerned about that.
Yeah, as far as the offensive line goes, I can't say I have zero concern. Like,
right,
working in 2 new starters and with how with how leaky they were against like Detroit, for example, in the first practice at least, it's something I want to see with my eyes on a field first.
I'm
they're going to be okay.
I'm more concerned about the starting 5 than the depth at O-line. Not saying that the starting 5 is worse than the depth, but I'm more concerned about Pinter and Pryor than I am about having capable backups that could step in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think long term they'll be fine, but I think maybe, you know very well, new offensive lines, they take time to gel. Yes, they've been together all spring and summer, but they haven't been playing games yet. So there might be some growing pains. As for the receivers, I agree with you because I've kind of tried to change my mindset and just look at the pass catching group as a whole. When you give me Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, Ashton Doolin being that next guy that's going to fill in, Mo Alley Cox, Kylan Granson, Nyheim Hines, Jonathan Taylor, it's fine. Yeah. A quarterback like Matt Ryan will find a way for that to work. Like, they have got, like, when you look at that whole thing, it's a diverse group. You have guys that can move the chains. You have guys that can create yards after the catch. You have guys that can take the top off of the defense. So I think it's fine. Honestly, adding a veteran at this point seems disruptive. Like, even T.Y. Hilton seems a little disruptive to me. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, defensive tackle, I also am concerned. Like, if you think about the last 2 years, Taylor Stallworth was the primary third defensive tackle, and he played really well. Mm-hmm. And I just don't see anyone who's ready to handle that workload right now and perform at a high level, which makes me feel like these defensive ends that can play inside and out are probably going to see a lot of snaps. Yeah. Taekwon, Dio, guys like that are probably going to be getting a lot of work, which isn't a bad thing. Like, they're good players. You want to see them play, but it would be good to have that reassurance that there's someone behind Buckner and Stewart that is ready to go right now.
Right. Yeah, I think I have faith in Eric Johnson being there at some point this year as a backup one tech, like run stuffer. I just don't know if he's there yet. And the past game did not quell my worries about that at all. The whole defensive line looked terrible in run defense, but especially the defensive tackles.
Yeah, and then this last thing I was kind of wanting to ask you about. So again, 3 practices, 1 preseason game left before it's, final decision time on this roster. Mm-hmm. Which players are like right there on the cusp? They're like right there on the bubble that you think a good week nudges them in, or this is like a really critical week for them?
Weirdly, I think Ben Banigou's kind of fallen into that territory with Ifedi Odenigbo playing really well this past week. And then him, like, I'm not saying Ben Banigou was terrible by any means in this past game, but it just wasn't great. Like, it was kind of just fine against backup offensive tackles, which you didn't want to see. So I think he needs kind of a big week and a good, even if he's only out there for a couple snaps in this final game against the Bucs, I want to see him be a little disruptive. A couple other guys in the bubble, I think, that just need to kind of continue what they're doing, though. Sterling Weatherford is one. I think he's right there. Like, he's got to be close to making this team he had a great game this week. I thought he was awesome this week. If he can just do a little more on special teams, do a little more on the snaps he gets, I think he can get Ifedi Odenigbo, I just mentioned him. I think he can just put an exclamation point on it this week as well. That's another guy. And on offense, Des Patman, I think, is another guy who can just put an exclamation point on it. I think he's right there. He's super close to solidifying it. Something that I really noted in my kind of quick rewatch of some things is I think he's actually run the most gunner snaps of any player this in the preseason for the Colts. Yeah, him. I think Tony Brown would have, but Tony Brown, they're only really doing 1 a game with him. But I think he's going to be the gunner. But it looks like I think their top 3 gunners this year are going to be Tony Brown, Isaiah Rodgers, and Des Patman. Like, those are going to be their 3 gunners, is what it seems like. If I had to guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen them get a lot of work throughout practice. So for me, I think one of these defensive tackles, the Colts are just begging for someone to have a dominant week. That, of course, would be great. I think you nailed it with Odenigbo and Banagoo. And then I think the linebacker situation, the depth guys, needs to be figured out because Doman, Forrest Ryan, and Weatherford all have a case to make it.
Right.
And I really hope for JoJo Doman's sake that he gets back to practicing this week because he missed the last week with an injury.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope all three of them participate throughout the week in practice, and maybe two of them make it. I don't know. Special teams is huge, so it's a big week for those three.
Yeah. The last thing I'll throw in there is the fourth safety battle. It's kind of really interesting to me because Armani Watts is the guy that we assume is going to get it. But Ronnie Thomas had just been a draft pick on, and he actually looked pretty good on defense in this past game. He just looked big,
lots of tackles.
Yeah, he looked big and fluid and fast. I don't know how ready he is, but he just moves so well. But then Trevor Denbo, man. I know we're gonna end every podcast now talking Trevor Denbo, but I charted the special teams tackles from this past game, and on the 7 return opportunities for the Lions, he had 4 tackles. He is this, and the 2 of the 3 tackles he didn't make 2 of them were on the big kick returns that went for almost touchdowns. So if he's not making the tackle this preseason, they're almost returning this stuff for scores. So I don't know, man. Trevor Denbo, I don't know if I would keep him. I don't really know, but he looks like a special team stud this preseason. I don't know. I really don't know if I keep him, but he just looks really good on special teams.
Yeah, for the Colts fans who remember the 2000s and 2010s, I get major Matt Giordano vibes from Trevor Denbo. Just a special teams demon.
Too. Yeah, I don't know.
You don't want to see him playing defensive snaps, but hell, you can be on my special teams anytime.
Yep.
And I think now that we're breaking down special teams competition, that probably puts a bow on it for us today, everyone. We'll be back with you tomorrow. The Colts get back to practicing again Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they finish up the preseason on Saturday back at Lucas Oil Stadium against the Buccaneers.
Yeah, make sure you guys are following us on social media at Jake Arthur NFL for all of your training camp coverage, at Zach Hicks 2 for all your preseason all 22 coverage, apparently. Follow all of our written work over at horseshoehuddle.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Locked On Colts YouTube. We are getting close to 1,000 subscribers. I think we're over 860 now. So
it needs to pick up. It needs to pick up though, because 10 days left. I'm getting a little nervous. I want that Twitter banner for you.
I always squeeze by, except for the Jack Cohen stuff. That's the only one I haven't squeezed by on. But you guys can make it happen for sure. Get us to 1,000 by the end of August. And then wherever you guys listen to the podcast, rate, review, subscribe, leave a comment. We always read them, even though if we don't always respond, we always read them, and we really just appreciate all the love you guys throw.
Yeah, I had to get sassy with someone today, but that's neither here nor there. Thank you guys again for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now make Locked On Fantasy Football your second listen. Find the intellectual fantasy expert, Vinny Iyer, who brings over 20 years of NFL expertise and a unique angle to give you guys the moves that no one else has. Get ready for your fantasy draft with Locked On Fantasy Football. We'll see you guys tomorrow.